Sheriff Anthony Stoddard of the Calverton County Sheriff's Department was working a routine overnight patrol on Route 9 outside Hargrove, Georgia, when he spotted a jet-black SUV idling at Pump 3 of the Quick Fuel on the county line. Brand new. Government plates he didn't recognize. And behind the wheel, stepping out with calm, deliberate movements, a black woman in her mid-30s, dressed like she'd just walked out of a federal briefing. Dark blazer, white blouse, tailored slacks, fuel nozzle in hand. Stoddard had been sheriff for 8 years and a deputy for 14 before that. 22 years on the job had given him what he called a red, an instinct for things that didn't belong. And in his mind, this was one of those things. He pulled his cruiser across the pump lane at an angle, activated his overhead lights, and stepped out before she even looked up. What Sheriff Anthony Stoddard did not know was that Special Agent and Herrera had just completed a 16-hour undercover operation at the FBI's Atlanta field office. A human trafficking sting that had taken 7 months to build and had rescued 11 victims that very night. He did not know that she had graduated with honors from Howard University before earning her law degree from Yale, where she was editor of the Law Review. He did not know that she had passed every background check, every psychological evaluation, every physical fitness standard the Bureau required, and had done so in the top 5% of her class at Quantico. He did not know that the black SUV was registered to the federal government of the United States of America. He did not know any of this. All he saw, beneath the pale wash of fluorescent light at 12:47 in the morning, was a black woman who, in his judgment, had no business being where she was, driving what she was driving, carrying herself the way she did. And so he got out of his car, and he walked toward her, and he rested his hand on his service weapon. And Herrera had stopped at this particular Quick Fuel because it was the last station before a long stretch of dark highway between Atlanta and her apartment in Decatur. She had made this stop before, same pump when it was open, same routine. Fuel the tank. Grab a water bottle. Keep moving. Get home. Tonight had been the longest night of a long year. She had spent the previous 4 days in deep cover, coordinating with Homeland Security and 3 state agencies on an operation that her supervisor called the most complex trafficking interdiction in the Southeast in a decade. The paperwork that followed had consumed what was left of the evening. She had not eaten since a granola bar at 9 a.m. Her feet ached from the hours of standing during post-operation debriefs. Her badge was in the center console where she always kept it after hours. She had just inserted her credit card into the pump reader when the red and blue strobes lit up the side of her SUV. Her first thought was that there was an accident nearby. Then she turned and saw the cruiser angled behind her, deliberately, precisely, blocking her in. And a feeling she had carried her entire adult life moved through her like cold water. She had felt it as a college sophomore, pulled over for a lane change she had signaled. As a law school graduate, questioned at the door of a conference she was presenting at. As a federal agent, given a second look in the bureau parking garage by a new security contractor who couldn't imagine she belonged there. It was the feeling of being presumed guilty before a single word was spoken. She kept her hands visible. She kept her breathing steady. She turned to face him and waited. "Evening," Stoddard said. The word had no warmth in it. "Good evening, Sheriff," and kept her voice even, her tone professional. "Can you tell me the reason for the stop?"
I'm parked.
"I wasn't driving. I'll ask the questions." He gestured toward her. "ID? Registration?" "I'm happy to provide both," Ann replied. "I just need to understand the legal basis for this contact." Stoddard's jaw shifted. "That vehicle, where'd you get it?" The question hit the air exactly the way it was meant to, dressed as procedure, naked as accusation, and felt the familiar fire rise behind her sternum and press it down. The way she always did, the way she had trained herself to do since long before the Bureau. She had arrested men who asked questions like that. She knew the type. She kept her hands where he could see them. "I work for the federal government," she said. "The vehicle is registered accordingly. I can provide documentation." Federal government. He said it the way people say words they don't believe. "Doing what?" "I'm a special agent with the FBI." Stoddard looked at her. Looked at the blazer, the composure, the midnight hour, the $75,000 truck, and something settled into his expression that was worse than disbelief. It was dismissal. "Sure you are," he said. "Registration. Now." And narrated every movement, calm and precise, the way she'd been trained, the way survival had required long before training. She retrieved her documents. She handed them over. She stood in the yellow light of the pump canopy and watched Stoddard examine the papers with the expression of a man looking for a reason to be right. The registration listed the vehicle owner as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Atlanta Field Division. The insurance was current. Her driver's license photo matched her face exactly. This should have been the end of it. "These could be fabricated," Stoddard said, still looking at the papers. "Government plates can be spoofed. How do I know you didn't take this vehicle from someone at the Bureau?" And stared at him with the measured stillness of someone who had learned that rage, even righteous rage, must be the last card played. "Sheriff," she said, "you are looking at valid federal documentation. You can run the VIN. You can call it in. Every record will confirm what I am telling you." At Pump 5, a man had stopped filling his tank entirely. Through the glass of the convenience store, two people stood watching, phones already in hand. Above them, mounted on the canopy frame, quick fuel security cameras recorded every word in high definition. Stoddard handed the documents back. "I think we need to sort this out at the station," he said. "Something about this whole situation doesn't sit right with me." "On what grounds?" and asked, and now there was an edge in it, clean and precise as a scalpel. Stoddard looked at her, and then, with the full confidence of a man who had never once been held accountable, he said the quiet part out loud. "On the grounds that a black woman alone at midnight in a brand new government truck needs a better explanation than I work for the FBI. That's my grounds." Anne's hands were still at her sides, but her eyes had changed. "Sheriff Stoddard," she said, and her voice had dropped to something almost calm, the way the ocean is calm just before the pressure changes. "I need you to understand something. You just said that out loud. On camera. In front of witnesses." She turned her eyes briefly toward the canopy above them, then back to him. "This is the last quiet moment either of us is going to have for a very long time." He didn't believe her. He should have. Anthony Stoddard had never lost a standoff. Not once in 22 years. Not with suspects. Not with lawyers. Not with county commissioners who occasionally questioned his methods and quickly learned not to bother. He was a large man in a small jurisdiction, and he had built his authority the way some men build walls, brick by brick, year by year, until the structure was so solid he'd forgotten it was something he'd constructed rather than something he deserved. Calverton County had elected him 3 times. His clearance rate looked good on paper if you didn't ask too many questions about how he got there. His deputies had learned early that disagreeing with Stoddard in public was a career decision they would regret. He called it command presence. His ex-wife had another name for it. Either way, it had worked for 22 years without serious consequence. And a man who goes that long without consequence stops believing consequence is real. And Herrera had spent those same 22 years becoming everything Stoddard could not imagine. She had grown up in southwest Atlanta, the daughter of a Jamaican-American nurse and a Colombian engineer who had told her, from the time she was old enough to understand, that she would have to be twice as good to get half as far, and that she should do it anyway. She had Howard University summa cum laude, Yale Law Review editor, Quantico top 8%, 6 years in the Bureau's Violent Crimes Division, 3 commendations, and tonight, 16 hours after walking into the most dangerous operation of her career, 11 people were breathing free air because of her. Stoddard saw none of that. He saw a black woman at a pump past midnight, and he had already made up his mind. The lights hit the side of the SUV and he knew before she turned around. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't paranoia. It was the same quiet recognition she'd felt a dozen times before in a dozen different settings. A knowledge that lived not in her mind but somewhere older, somewhere in the body, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky changes color. She had learned to trust that feeling. She had also learned, at great personal cost, exactly what to do with it. She set the nozzle carefully back against the pump. She turned slowly. She kept her hands where the cameras and the coming confrontation could both see them. The memories moved through her fast, the way they always did in moments like this. Not with drama, but with the flat exhaustion of accumulated evidence. The traffic stop at 19 where she'd signaled and the officer said she hadn't. The doctoral study group she'd been asked to leave because a professor assumed she was in the wrong room. The real estate agent who'd shown her 3 listings below her budget without asking what it was. The bureau parking garage, 8 months into her career, when a contractor had followed her to her car and asked who she was visiting. Each one a small verdict delivered without trial. Each one survived. Each one filed away in the part of her that never fully rested, even when the rest of her was bone-tired. And she was bone-tired tonight. 16 hours. 11 lives. Paperwork that had taken what remained of the evening. She had earned the right to simply go home. She breathed in. She breathed out. She had been here before. She knew exactly what this required. Not rage, not yet. Precision. Documentation. Patience deployed like a weapon. She waited for him to speak first. Stoddard took the documents the way men like him always did. Like he was doing her a favor by accepting them. He held the registration under the canopy light, tilting it slightly, making a performance of his scrutiny. His deputy, a younger man named Reyes who had said nothing since arriving 90 seconds behind the cruiser, stood 2 steps back with the careful stillness of someone who had learned when to disappear, and watched Stoddard's eyes move across the page. She watched the moment he registered the owner of record, not her name but the federal header above it, and she watched him decide in real time not to let it matter. "Registration can be faked," he said, handing it back without looking at her. "Seen it done clean enough to fool people who should know better. Run the VIN," and said, "It will pull federal fleet records. The vehicle belongs to the Bureau. I intend to." He unclipped his radio and turned slightly away, a small power gesture, the kind meant to remind her that he controlled the pace of this, and heard him request a stolen vehicle check on her plates. She heard the dispatcher's slight pause, the half-second of confusion that comes when a query returns a federal registration instead of a civilian one. Stoddard either didn't notice or didn't care. Behind him, Deputy Reyes had shifted his weight. Not dramatically, just enough. The small, readable language of a man recalculating. And filed that away. "While we wait," Stoddard said, turning back, "why don't you explain to me what a woman in your situation is doing out here at this hour? In your situation." She noted the phrasing precisely. So did the camera above pump 3. And reached into her blazer with the measured calm of someone who had done this under circumstances far more dangerous than a gas station in Hargrove. "I'm reaching into my interior pocket," she said clearly, her voice carrying just enough to reach the cameras and the man at pump 5 who had stopped pretending not to watch. "I am retrieving my federal credentials." She produced the badge wallet and opened it in a single practiced motion. FBI Special Agent. Her photograph. Her name. The gold shield that had taken years of her life to earn. Beneath it, her bureau identification card, and clipped behind that, a contact card for the Atlanta field office with a 24-hour duty line that would connect Stoddard to people far above his pay grade in under 30 seconds. She held it out and let him look. Stoddard looked at the badge, then at her, then back at the badge with the expression of a man who had expected to be surprised and was refusing to allow it. He took the wallet, examined it with the same performative skepticism he'd applied to her registration, and handed it back. "That doesn't mean anything to me out here," he said. The words landed in the night air and seemed to hang there. At pump 5, the man who had been watching raised his phone. Unhurried, deliberate, the small bright rectangle catching the canopy light as he adjusted his angle to frame the cruiser, the sheriff, and in standing between them with her credentials still open in her hand. And didn't look at the phone. She didn't need to. "Sheriff," she said quietly, "I need you to think very carefully about your next words," and pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my supervisor," she said. Not a request. A statement of fact delivered for the record. Stoddard's hand moved toward her arm. "I didn't give you permission to. You don't have the authority to prevent me from making a phone call." She held his gaze and dialed. The line rang twice before the voice of Special Agent in Charge Denise Walcott came through. Sharp, alert, unbothered by the hour in the way that senior federal agents never quite stop being on duty. "Herrera. Status. I'm at the Quick Fuel on Route 9 at the Calverton County line," and said, her voice level and precise. "I have been detained by Sheriff Anthony Stoddard of the Calverton County Sheriff's Department. He has declined to accept my federal credentials and is currently threatening to impound a bureau vehicle." A half-second of silence. Then, "Put him on," and extended the phone toward Stoddard. He didn't take it. "I'm going to need you to end that call," he said instead, his voice dropping into the register he used when he wanted to remind people what he was. "You're interfering with an active law enforcement investigation, and I will charge you accordingly." "An investigation into what?" and asked. He didn't answer, because there was no answer, only the forward momentum of a man who had never learned to stop. By now 3 phones were raised and recording. A woman near the entrance had turned her car off entirely. Deputy Reyes had taken a single step backward, a quiet but complete withdrawal, the body language of a man placing distance between himself and a decision he wanted no part of. Walcott's voice came through the speaker, calm and absolute. "Sheriff Stoddard, I need you to listen to me very carefully." Stoddard reached out and closed his hand around Ann's wrist. It happened fast and it happened slowly, the way moments that change everything tend to operate on 2 timescales at once. His fingers wrapped around her forearm just above the pulse point, and the phone with Walcott's voice still coming through it tilted in Ann's hand but did not fall. She did not pull away. She did not raise her voice. She did not give him the reaction he was counting on to justify what he'd already done. She stood completely still and let the cameras see everything. "Sheriff Stoddard," she said, and her voice was the steadiest it had been all night. Clear and unhurried, pitched to carry across the pump island and into every microphone on every phone currently aimed in their direction. "You are physically restraining a federal officer without cause." She said it the way she'd been trained to document. Present tense. Precise. Irrefutable. Stoddard's grip didn't loosen. If anything, the words made him hold tighter, the way men like him always respond to being named. Not with retreat but with doubling down, as though force could retroactively become justification. 22 years had taught him that escalation usually worked, that people backed down, that the badge absorbed consequences so he didn't have to. From the phone, Walcott's voice, "Stoddard, release her. Now." He did not release her. The man at pump 5 had moved closer. The woman who had cut her engine was out of her car. Deputy Reyes stood frozen at the edge of the light, his hand nowhere near his weapon. His face the face of a man watching a disaster he could not stop and had already decided not to own. For cameras. One grip. One moment. It was already over. Stoddard just hadn't felt it yet. The headlights came first. 2 black SUVs, identical to Anne's, identical to every bureau vehicle that had ever made a local department quietly reconsider its choices, turned off Route 9 and rolled into the quick fuel lot with the unhurried certainty of vehicles that have never needed to rush. No sirens. No theatrics. Just the slow, deliberate arc of federal authority arriving exactly when it said it would. Stoddard's grip loosened. Not all the way, but enough. The first door opened and Special Agent in charge Denise Walcott stepped out. She was a trim woman in her early 50s, natural hair, no jewelry except a watch, dressed in the kind of quiet professional clothes that said she had not been home when the call came and had not wasted time changing. She held her badge forward as she walked. Not raised dramatically, just forward, the way people carry things they have never once had to prove. She crossed the lot without hurrying and stopped 4 feet from Stoddard. She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She said nothing for a moment that lasted longer than it should have, the silence doing the work that words would have been too kind to do. Sheriff Stoddard. Her voice was the temperature of a federal filing. Release that agent. Then I need your weapon and your badge. Right now. Stoddard let go of Anne's wrist. The lot was absolutely silent except for the hum of the pumps and the distant pull of highway traffic. Every phone was still raised. Every eye was on the man in the uniform deciding, in real time, whether he had any moves left. He didn't. He looked once at Deputy Reyes. Reyes looked at the ground. Stoddard unclipped his badge with hands that were no longer steady. The footage was online before Anne's SUV had cleared the lot. The man from Pump 5 had uploaded it in 3 pieces, the credential dismissal, the phone call, the grab, and by 2 a.m. it had moved past the local news aggregators and into the kind of viral current that has no ceiling. The thumbnail that spread fastest was the clearest frame from the 3rd clip. Stoddard's hand around Anne's wrist, her face turned slightly toward the camera, composed in a way that made his grip look like exactly what it was. The caption someone added needed only 4 words. She told him so. By 6 a.m., 4 million views. By 7, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had opened a preliminary inquiry. By 9, 3 national networks had dispatched crews to Hargrove, a town that had never once been news. The Calverton County Commissioner's Office, which had not answered a press call in 6 years, issued a statement by 10 a.m. saying they were taking the matter extremely seriously, which everyone understood to mean they were calculating how far Stoddard would drag them down if they waited any longer. The emergency session was called at noon. It lasted 40 minutes. The termination letter was signed before the building emptied. His pension review took slightly longer, 2 days, before the board determined that the conduct captured on 4 independent recordings met the threshold for forfeiture. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked by the state by the end of the week. Anthony Stoddard's name entered the curriculum of 3 police reform training programs before the month was out. Not as a cautionary tale told in the abstract. As footage. Time-stamped, unedited, and permanent. He had wanted Hargrove to know his name. Now everyone did. The federal civil rights suit took 14 months. The judgment took the jury 4 hours. $52 million. Structural reform of the entire Calverton County Sheriff's Department. A federal consent decree that placed the department under independent oversight for 7 years and mandated retraining, body cameras, and quarterly civil rights audits. The county's insurance carrier dropped them before the ink was dry. 3 additional complaints against Stoddard, filed years earlier and quietly buried, were unsealed and entered into the public record, and stood on the courthouse steps afterward and said very little. She thanked her legal team. She thanked SAC Walcott. She said that the goal had never been the money, and anyone who had watched her work for 6 years knew that was true. What she did with it proved it further. The Herrera Justice Scholarship launched 8 months later, full funding for first-generation law students of color, 20 recipients in the inaugural class. Each one selected not only on academic merit, but on demonstrated commitment to public service, and spoke at the orientation. She told them about the gas station. She told them about the weight she carried into that lot and the precision required to carry it without dropping it. She told them that excellence, in a world that presumes your guilt, is both a personal achievement and a political act. She received the FBI Director's Award for Field Excellence the following spring, for the trafficking operation, the one that had kept her at the office 16 hours the night everything changed. A month after the ceremony, on a Tuesday, just past midnight, she stopped at the Quick Fuel on Route 9 to fill her tank. She paid. She drove home. No one stopped her. The lesson remains clear and permanent. Success isn't evidence of crime. Professional achievement isn't suspicious. And when law enforcement officers treat black excellence as proof of criminality, the consequences can cost them everything, while the people they targeted continue to rise higher than they could ever imagine. Driving while black isn't a crime. Owning nice things while black isn't evidence of drug dealing. If you've ever been questioned about something you legally earned, this story is for you. What do you think really changes police behavior? Lawsuits, training, or something else entirely? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. We read every single,